And thank you so much, Amanda, for being here tonight. As some of you might know, Amanda is one of the greatest people in RGD, and she's the director in the board meetings, and she has an independent brand consultant, and she's a graphic designer for 15 years, and she specialized in branding, packaging, and she spent 10 years in Ottawa, where governmental agencies kept her busy, and now she's in Southwestern Ontario, if I'm right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah. And she has been working with small businesses and real people. And she's also the vice chair for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So welcome, Amanda. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for having me. I think this is a great idea what you're doing. One thing I've done myself on my journey certainly has been to listen to other people's career paths and see what they've done. I mean, obviously, no two paths are the same, and you can't just copycat, or clone what someone else has done, but you can always glean insights and ideas for yourself that you can take away and that really speak to you. So, this is something that I've definitely done right from the beginning. And so the fact that you guys are doing this and bringing it to your group is super smart. I think it's a great idea. I do have a bit of a slide deck, I guess, that might illustrate some of my points a little bit better. So yeah, it looks like I can share. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Sounds good.
And then, yeah, you guys can see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And my son is in a theater camp right now online, and you'll hear occasional yelling because he gets really excited and overly enthusiastic about it. So I apologize if you're hearing any screaming, that's what that is. So I just titled my presentation, Never Say Never. You'll see why in a few places, but really just the theme being, what life is going to throw you a bunch of stuff your way, and you're really not going to know what to expect and what's coming. But I would encourage you to be open to every possibility. My life has taken a couple of turns that I wasn't expecting at all. And if somebody had said to me in my early 20s, this is what you were going to be doing, I wouldn't have believed them at all. I never would have placed that bet. So, but it's kind of cool to see how life evolves and how different choices affect, ultimately your decisions, whether it's professionally or personally. So I just say, take it all on and go for the ride, and make sure that you're kind of always, in a place where you're happy and learning and thriving. So just starting from the beginning. So my parents actually are from Goa in India. So it's kind of it's sort of a different place in that it's very heavily Catholic. So my parents grew up sort of immersed in Catholic culture, but also in India. So it was kind of this strange, hybrid of like Indian cooking, but specifically Goan food, as well as, but English was their first language. They dressed in Western dress, they listened to Western music, that sort of thing. So it was sort of this kind of more separate, kind of community there. And when they came to Canada, it was this huge, transition for them, but there were some things that they sort of had on their side, having English as that first language. So, and having a big Goan community in the Toronto area was also super helpful for them to sort of identify with the people there. So, but yeah, as you probably know about India, it's a really colorful place. There's a lot going on. You're always bombarded by sights and sounds. And so I definitely think that was a part of, what my experience was growing up. We had a big family, we had a lot of celebrations. And lots of food. We would talk about food morning, noon, and night. And so I think that, that being part of our culture has really played into sort of where I've ended up career-wise. So these are my parents here, moved to Canada the year before I was born. So my brother and I were born here. I really enjoyed digging up these photos, by the way. I haven't looked at this stuff in a really long time. So they moved into, I think it was Etobicoke first is where I was born, and just kind of the typical immigrant story. Started with nothing, worked their way up. Neither of them went to university. So they both kind of just got, blue collar jobs in the area, bought a tiny house, then bought a slightly bigger house, then a slightly bigger house. And in a very typical fashion, they wanted their kids to work super hard and not really fool around too much. So academics was super important, as it is in a lot of cultures, and the emphasis was there. And I look at this now and I just think it's interesting because my mom was actually a super creative person. She can pick up a paintbrush and paint pretty much anything. But she didn't really shared that with us. I think there was this whole feeling that, your kids have to succeed in this new country, and schools, kind of trumps everything. So we never played around with art at home at all. It was, once I showed some aptitude for math and science, I was really encouraged to sort of stay in that direction. And that's sort of ultimately what I did. They didn't force me to do anything, but ultimately I kind of sensed that being an engineer would be a really good path to go on, and partly because I knew it would please them. So that's exactly what I did. I actually went to the University of Waterloo. This is my electrical engineering graduating class. So I did a co-op program there for 5 years, and I even went on and did a master's in engineering. So certainly that's exactly what the path that I thought I would be on. So that was something that, wasn't really expecting to change, but obviously I'm not doing that now. But one important thing did come out of that Waterloo experience, and that was meeting my husband, so I've circled our faces because it's a lot of people there. But so we met in class at Waterloo, graduated. We both thought we would be in that industry forever. So we moved to Ottawa together and started our life there. So and one thing I will say about the engineering experience, I don't regret it for a second. The education there puts a lot of emphasis on project management more than anything else. So, the kind of projects that you do, you have a specific budget, a specific timeline, specific parameters that you have to achieve. And I think that really did pave the way for me into a freelancing career, because all of those things I've definitely taken on and has been really super important when you run your own business. So definitely that education, in one sense, was not at all wasted. I really appreciate sort of that journey and how it got me there. But we did move to Ottawa, so that was sort of getting into our middle years. And I started working at a high-tech company actually initially, and then I got laid off as it was during the crash of tech, and I was also pregnant at the time. So my original thought was, okay, I'll stay home for a year. I'll go back to engineering. That seemed like the most obvious thing to do. But as I was home with my daughter, I really wanted to be home with her. I realized, an engineering work is difficult. It's time consuming. It really takes you away from home. And I was starting to look more at what my mom had done and how she had stayed home with us and raised us. So I really kind of thought that would be what I would do as well. So, when my life takes another turn, I decide to be home full time. And then I'm raising this tiny baby at home and getting super bored. So, again, not something I was expecting. I kind of thought I had my life laid out for me. So it was just sort of a random, I guess, event where I wanted to sort of keep my mind busy, do something outside of the home while I was taking care of this tiny baby, and somewhat randomly signed up for graphic design courses at Algonquin College. And I to this day, I still can't tell you what made me pick that out of the guidebook. I think there was a part of me that I hasn't really articulated that realized, when I look back now, whenever I was in a volunteer group or, helping out with things, I'd always be the person to say, hey, I'll do the poster, and everyone would say, sure, go ahead. And I would use Microsoft Word art and play around with it for hours. And so in retrospect, now looking back, I think it was always in me. I just didn't know it was called graphic design, really. And once I took the courses, walking into those night classes, I can still remember everything kind of clicked. I loved the idea of thinking about design as a problem. Having a specific amount of space on a page and needing to tell a story and deliver a message. It all seemed very obvious and somewhat intuitive for me. And I also saw this path to having a career while raising children. I'd be able to do this at home with a computer. I just needed the software and the hardware, and I could do this in my space and still be able to raise my children. So decided not to go back into engineering and just kind of put up a tiny static HTML website, told all my friends what I was doing, and really flopped around for the next few years. I didn't read anything about business at the time. Frankly, I wasn't really trying to grow business. I was really just trying to pass some of the time and use my, kind of keep my mind mentally occupied. So I wasn't actively looking for work a lot. I was mostly trying to spend time with my kids. But because I was in Ottawa, it did give me the opportunity to sort of connect with people, in the government through specific departments, where maybe colleagues were working in that. So I did get some very practical experience with publications, annual reports, infographics, that sort of thing, with a couple of departments, which I put here. And that was a good learning experience for sure, because there was, the idea of everything having to be bilingual, all the requirements and standard, the guidelines, the logo usage, all of that I learned kind of on the fly by working in those departments. So, being in Ottawa, obviously that was a unique opportunity that I don't think I would have had elsewhere. But when I tried to do any kind of private work and trying to just sort of get work on my own, I was really kind of flailing. And really it came down to, I think, a mistake a lot of people make, which is, I just need this really great website and people will see my portfolio and fall in love with me. And I can tell you right now, that's not true. That people hire people, not businesses. So I've really learned, and it's taken me a long time, and it's been a very slow process for me. I'll say I did not do it correctly, but realized that the more I could insert myself into scenarios where I get to meet people that I'm, trying to get as clients, the more successful I'm going to be. Sitting at home and just hoping that the phone will ring is definitely not the way to run a freelance career. And I had to learn that the hard way. Again, I wasn't, I was lucky that I wasn't financially super driven at the time. I did have other priorities, but I was able to really learn kind of slowly as I went along. So again, I kind of dug up some things from the past, so you can kind of see, I guess, an evolution of my website and my design. So it's kind of funny just to see, to take a look at this, and you can kind of see that, the website snapshot the screenshot that I took on the bottom right there, I was kind of doing everything and anything. Anybody that kind of came through the door, I was sort of happy to get the work, and it would be sometimes just a brochure, sometimes a business card, sometimes a website, sometimes it was multiple things altogether, but I wasn't really cohesive in my service offering. And so as a result, the clients that I got wasn't cohesive either. So that was another learning experience that kind of came about through my career, so I was able to learn from two key people at that time. So if you are sort of looking into, a freelancing career and want to understand how to market yourself, Elise Benin, she's on the left-hand side there. She is a coach for creatives. I think she's out of New Jersey, I want to say, but she puts out a lot of free content on how to build a creative business and how to price, how to write contracts, all of that. So I learned a lot from just kind of digesting all the content that she had online, as well as Seth Godin. So both of them together, just really great ways of thinking about how to package up your business in a way that speaks to the people that you want to speak to. So they kind of really shaped my sort of, I'd say, intermediate part of my career, where I started to get a little bit more honed in on what I was looking for. I still wasn't razor sharp yet, but I was starting to see that, if I could offer bigger packages and really sort of share as much knowledge in a meeting, really be curious about the business and see that they're saying more than what they're actually saying. They might be saying they want a website, but really what they need is possibly more than that, and more strategy and in their, the kind of voice that they need to have for their consumer, that sort of thing. Learned a lot about that. And so these were two sort of key, two key online people that kind of really helped at that time. So another part of the never say never. So, at the same time that I was sort of moving into graphic design and away from engineering, my husband also started planting a few vegetables back in Ottawa. And every year, every summer, his garden would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually he wanted to try moving to the country in Ottawa, which we did for about 5 years. And he realized this is what he wanted to do full time. It had been a hobby up to that point. He was still working in engineering at BlackBerry. And then realized, no, this is what I want to do. So we kind of looked at each other and thought, well, what are we doing in Ottawa? All of our families in Southwestern Ontario. We ended up in the city that he grew up in, St. Thomas, which is outside of London. My parents are in the GTA. And so we just kind of thought, well, we're so far away from family and our kids are small and we want them to see their grandparents and all of that. So we kind of picked up and moved in 2010 to this farm. So this is an aerial view of our house right now, or our land right now, just a small section of it, but this green roofed thing here is the house that I'm sitting in right now. So we moved, 2010. But I have to say, if anybody had said to me, you're going to move to St. Thomas, Ontario, and you're going to live on a farm, I never would have believed them. There was no way I could see in my mind that ever happening. But it's really cool to see the way things, do evolve. It's a great place for our kids to grow up. We're exposed to so much. We've really gotten to know a really great community here that really cares about food. My husband grows organic vegetables, so people who really care about cooking and are foodies. And really value sort of their health, through food is sort of the community that we met as soon as we got here. And that has been like so amazing for everyone. So it was really kind of a cool, departure from where I kind of saw myself living. I kind of pictured living in Ottawa and high tech and in the city for the rest of my life, and it's taken quite a turn. So, but all for the better, for sure. So one of the things about moving to a smaller city, I have to say, was, it was actually a great advantage. It's so much easier as a freelancer to stick out, sort of be the bigger fish in a small pond versus the other way around. So it was, by joining the Chamber of Commerce, by going to certain, specific networking events, I was able to sort of meet people very quickly, and my name sort of got recognized and sort of thrown around. Another thing that I did, which I recommend to people who, if you perhaps hate the idea of putting yourself out there in a networking situation, because it can be for sure intimidating. Another thing I did was I wrote for our local business publication. So this comes out monthly, and for about 4 years or 5 years, I would write an article every month about everything to do with the digital economy, because our town is, a little bit smaller, 40,000 people. Not everyone was sort of really up necessarily. The older population, at least, of course, was not necessarily up on social media or what to do with, all the platforms and how they could be scaling their business. So I would write some articles just to kind of give them, some really basic knowledge. But that really helped, again, to sort of have that name repetition. People would see me at events, or they would see my website, or they would see that I was a member of our Chamber of Commerce, or they would see my articles. So, just having that kind of top of mind in people's minds. So maybe they don't need graphic design work today, but when they do 6 months from now, having that name recollection is really, really valuable. So doing that sort of thing in your community, if you're looking to kind of pursue a career like this, I highly recommend. If there's anything that you can do consistently, that gets your name out there. So, these articles didn't pay anything. It was, a pretty small publication, but definitely I saw, people would say, oh, I read your article, and would ask questions and would approach me for work. So it was definitely a really super valuable way to do things. And the other thing that I took advantage of was the Small Business Enterprise Center. Again, it's one of those things that I just kind of discounted, didn't really think too much about needing it. I kind of thought, no, I've got to go at this alone. And I finally walked in there one day and ended up meeting the director there. And she was a fantastic woman. She got super excited about the stuff I was doing and would, sing my praises to anybody who would listen. So that really helped. And so that kind of barrier, again, just sort of thinking, oh, that's not for me, or maybe that's not going to be appropriate in this case. I'm really glad I didn't listen to that voice for too long. Because a lot of things have followed from that. So, again, any kind of place where you can sort of become a little bit involved, and it can be on your own level, whether it's just kind of giving them some free content, or, offering to maybe talk to groups if you feel comfortable with that, any kind of way in a small community like mine that worked really well. And so, on top of kind of figuring out more what I like to do, and knowing that I wanted to do sort of larger scale projects, and then getting my name out there a little bit more, I was able to work with some companies in our area that, had been around. Usually they're independently owned businesses for 40 years. And they were, some of them were looking to update either their branding or their website or printed materials. In this case, it was all of those things. So HD Painting, a really great company. I always admired them because I couldn't believe it. The owner has 6 kids, and 5 of them came to work for his painting company, which I think really speaks to just how great a leader he is. And there's no egos there. So anyway, it was really great to work with him. So they were, commercial painters, but they looked very small scale with the branding that they had. So they had come to me initially just for their website. They didn't find it was working really well. It wasn't driving enough traffic. But, I was able to sort of convince them that they kind of needed, just an overhaul in their whole aesthetic. And to really look like the big guys, because, this company does, I think he said $2 million in painting sales a year. And they had been using sort of this handmade logo for so long. So we were able to kind of step everything up, and he was super happy with that. And they've grown by leaps and bounds since then. And so this was sort of the projects that I started to realize I really enjoyed doing, was just this larger scale, when you're able to sort of have your hand in everything and make sure that, whatever channel that they're marketing through, everything is consistent and has the same look and feel. So that was something that I really enjoyed doing and, pursued more. So I was doing a lot of that in the last, sort of, well, this would have been like more than 4 years ago, I guess. The pandemic has totally screwed up my timeline, so I'm getting all my dates wrong. But another thing that we did before the pandemic was a rebrand of our local public transit. So again, this was something that came into my lap because I had reached out to a few of the marketing experts in our community. I tried to stay squarely in the area of graphic design. So when people are looking for marketing campaigns and that, they would come to me, but it wasn't something that I felt was a real skill set of mine. So I was looking forward, I was looking kind of outward to people that were in my community that were doing these sorts of things. And there was a gentleman here, Brian, who was much more, puts marketing campaigns together for small businesses. And he was able to secure this contract. And so when the branding part came up, he came to me and said, I think you do a good job of, kind of representing our city. So it required all kinds of things, beyond the branding. We, of course, had to decal up the vehicles. We rebuilt all the transit shelters, new stop signs, new signage for the building, a transit map that worked on the web and print. So it was a nice big project as well. It was great to sort of see. And I mean, every time I drive now in our city, I get to see this. So that's kind of a cool thing that, again, being an independent designer, a one-person team, living in Toronto, obviously I wouldn't have got a contract like that, but, being able to live in this smaller community, being able to kind of put my mark on something like this was obviously super satisfying and really, a great plus, I think, for living where I do. And at this point I did join RGD. I can't remember exactly the year. Hillary probably knows or could look it up. But, it was something I had really been lurking in the background. There's a really great guy here in London, Jesse Gibb. He would often webcast any events that were going on with RGD at his office, and he would just invite anybody to come and watch. And so I kind of snuck into a few of those, met some really great people, talked to Jesse, talked to Jason. And they talked really highly of RGD, and I could see all the great resources that were coming out of there that were being shared. And so they just got to a point where I thought, I can't understand why I'm avoiding this any longer. And I decided to join. And of course, I'm really glad that I did. And I would say, just a few things to think about, when you join an organization like this. Like any association, you get what you put in. So, just sort of paying the dues and then expecting things to happen isn't generally how these things work. You usually, to put in a bit of effort, whether it's getting your name out, kind of meeting people, joining events, offering to help, volunteer in specific, in certain ways. That's where you get that growth that you're looking for when you join something like this. So, it does require you to sort of put a little bit of effort into it. But I will say it's a really great place to practice skills that maybe you haven't had a chance to do in school or, in your early part of your career. Things like public speaking or writing content for the newsletter, working with groups on committees, especially volunteer committees, that can always be super tricky. But to get work done and really kind of keep moving the needle forward, this is a great place to sort of get that experience, because that's very true for RGD, and just overall get inspired by the people that you meet. I would say that it's not necessarily a place that you should look for work. That's kind of a separate part of your career when you're a freelancer. I certainly didn't join RGD for that reason. But things do, of course, getting your name out there and people knowing who you are. Again, people hire people, not businesses. So this is just another way to sort of get your face out there and getting people to, understanding who you are and what kind of person you are and getting to know you. So RGD is just another great place to kind of have that happen. So that's certainly been the experience for me. And so, yeah, it's been great. The other thing that happened probably about, I think it was 4 to 5 years ago now, was there were a few food producers in our area that kind of, just like any other client, came to me and said, I need labels or I need branding for my bakery. And when I started doing this work, I realized I kind of hit upon this revelation that I loved this work way more than rebranding a law firm or insurance brokers or anything like that. And not to discount that work. I know people who love that and really love the corporate branding in that. But it was just something that I wasn't getting nearly as pumped about. And, again, looking back at food being such an important part of my culture, being part of my husband's work and the community that we've met, it kind of, all the signs pointed that, food is probably where it's at for me. And I didn't know what that really meant. I for a while, it was kind of like, okay, I'll just put these cool projects that I really enjoyed front and center of my website. But everything that I learned about marketing, up until that point, all said things like you need to, to be more successful, you need to niche down. You need to be really specific about your industry or your service offering or both. That's how you can speak to crowds more succinctly. And that was what I've been telling my clients all along, but I hadn't been practicing it myself. So once I realized that this was something that I really wanted to do, I kind of just took the leap. I created a new business name, iCandy, created a new website, put all my food portfolio on there, which at the time wasn't very big. But I started marketing myself that way. And, up to then I had been doing about 10 years of general graphic design, and it had been slow and I had learned a lot very slowly. So I kind of, was a little, I guess, pessimistic and thinking, okay, this will probably take another maybe 5 to 10 years to really take off. So I'll keep doing the other general graphic design work to pay the bills and just try to, whenever I do any kind of marketing, I'll pursue this. But I think because this is my second shot around, I kind of knew what I was doing. I had that experience behind me. And one thing I'll say, when you do niche down like this, again, whether it's an industry or a specific service, your decisions that you make to market yourself are so much easier because you're usually bombarded with so many ways to, do you pay for Instagram ads? Do you join this association? Do you, whatever, all the decisions that you have to make day to day on how to promote yourself. It gets a lot easier when you have a specific niche, because then you can say, well, this is obviously not suitable for what I want to do, but this is. So my work actually for promoting myself got a lot easier, not harder, even though it seemed like I was really turning away work, right? By saying that I was just going to sit squarely in this space. It can be really scary and daunting for sure. But all the things that they say about it are true. The more you can niche down, whatever that is for you, you can speak more clearly to it. People hear that message more clearly. If they know you're a graphic designer, but they don't know, specifically what you do, it can be hard for them to wrap their heads around it. But if you say I'm a motion graphics designer, then, there's some kind of recognition there, or a spark. So the more you can kind of figure out for yourself what that is, even earlier on, I would say you're going to see more success, because that was certainly true for me. One quick example I'll give you, and I tell people, because this is what I say to my clients too all the time when they have a business, that they say, oh, anybody who comes through the door is my customer. If you think of the example of a carpenter, and, technically any carpenter can build any kind of table. But say, for instance, you're a client and you're looking for a carpenter and you want a mid-century modern style table. You're probably going to look at people whose portfolios have a mid-century modern table, even though anyone could probably do that job for you. So people do kind of, in their minds, are looking, they don't want to take risks. Business owners don't want to take risks. So they want to see something that's already been done before. So they're likely to hire that person who has already done it. So, that's true again for marketing yourself. If you can sort of really hone in and really get to that specific place, and then people see, bam, that's what you do. It becomes really easy for them to kind of see that it's less of a risk to hire you. So yeah, that's worked out super well for me. So, moving into the present, I have sort of kept both business names. I still have a lot of repeat clients, having done this for so long. I have clients that I've had for years. So I kind of still work under that banner for them. In the community, I'm known by my name as well. So I elected to kind of keep that going, although I do have a plan to eventually dissolve that and bring everything under the Eye Candy banner. And so with Eye Candy, I've got a chance to work on some pretty cool packaging projects. Packaging, again, I guess you could say with niching down that maybe things could potentially get boring because you're doing, quote unquote, the same thing. But I find that I'm learning more than I ever have before, just because in the food space, in particular, there's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of details that you have to comply with. So, the size of the nutrition fact label and the ingredient list, the minimum font sizes, things like that. It requires a lot of attention to detail. It's really easy to screw up. So just kind of, taking everything that I did learn about print and digital and graphic design in general, and then just applying it to the food space has been pretty cool. So, in packaging, it's a pretty small real estate, usually sitting on the shelf, and it's usually right up against all their competition. So you're always kind of thinking, how do we stand out? How do we make a customer, be drawn to the product and pick it up? So visual hierarchy is really important. What are they going to see first, second, and third? Really deciding on those beforehand, and then making sure that we've sort of designed to those rules. So in this case, this client actually already had her branding in place when she came to me. And then the designer that she was supposed to work with had dropped out. So when she sort of showed me this branding, I thought it made sense to me for what she wanted to do, but it was almost a little too saccharine or juvenile. I'm not sure what the word is, but she wanted to appeal to professional moms who didn't necessarily have time to bake from scratch. So we wanted a bit more of a sort of upscaled appeal to it. So I kind of paired that branding with grounding it in some brown tones and sans serif fonts, just to kind of elevate it a little bit. And so she was really happy about that. And then we were able to translate all that into her website. And with food, there's a lot of important print materials like pitch decks and sell sheets and all that kind of thing. And they all have to have that sort of look and feel. So helping with all of that as well, and just keeping everything kind of tied together. So that's one example. This one I just did, well, I've been working on it for 6 months, but we unveiled it in the beginning of March, I guess. This was one of those cool, I don't know, I love rebranding. I find that it's really interesting to sort of see what they're using, what they've already, they've proven a great product in the marketplace. And people identify with what they are already using. So how do we maintain that brand equity, but bring it into a place that more people can get behind? So in this case, these guys, this husband and wife team, they make hot sauces. And at the time, he had his brother doing the labels, and the brother was really into like skeletons and the Grim Reaper. And so there was a lot of that on their packaging, which is actually for the hot sauce crowd, not uncommon. People like that kind of, it's so hot, it's going to, kill you kind of vibe. So they had gotten quite far along with their business. They've been in business since 2013. With this aesthetic, and it was working really well. However, they were ready to sort of move into a space where they wanted to appeal to a more mainstream crowd. They wanted to look more family friendly. They didn't, they wanted to be in people's tables that wouldn't necessarily love skeletons. So then again, it was this sort of, looking at their logo, which they had in the top left there. How do we make it more visually impactful, but still kind of, still feel familiar and correct to people that are already their fans, but bring it up and make it really, visually strong. And then what I also decided to do was we did away with the graphics altogether. We actually even changed the names of the sauces themselves, but I did sort of keep the color scheme. So, kind of intact and brought that into a gradient look instead. So there was some sort of connection to the past. So, if someone's reaching for their blueberry plague hot sauce, and now it's called wild blueberry and scorpion, at least there's some color, that they could identify with when they're grabbing it off the shelf. But ultimately, we were really, wanting to expand their clientele and really reach for people who, aren't familiar necessarily with the older style, but want something that looks and tastes really good on their table. So again, this one, now that I have this sort of arsenal behind me of being able to deliver digitally and in print, we worked on all their materials as well, all of their pitch decks and print labels and stuff. And The last thing I just did recently, which I haven't done before, we're going to be having a custom shrink wrap label. So instead of that black shrink wrap, we've got some artwork there that we'll be putting on, and so it should stand out on the shelf even more. So that was exciting. So again, always learning about new substrates and the printing perils which go with each. So just keep learning, keep asking questions. It continues to be super fun. This last one too, we're very, very close to launching, but I thought I would share because I'm excited about it. And this was another rebrand. So this company has been around for quite some time as well, but really only known in the London area. And it's kind of an interesting product because it is coffee, but it's coffee that's sort of roasted with herbs. And the result is a real coffee that has caffeine with no other taste other than coffee. However, the herbs allow you to have, it takes away the sort of the acidic after effects of coffee and gives you less jitters. And it's good, tasty coffee. It's fair trade and it's organic. So to me, that was a really confusing message. Like, how do we tell people this is still coffee? Because people are used to a lot of herbal alternatives to coffee or chaga coffee and that sort of thing. And so we weren't necessarily appealing to that crowd. We're appealing to a crowd who still really likes the taste of coffee itself, just doesn't want the effects of it. So in this case, the branding well, I should say more of the packaging aesthetic was really just to drive home this idea that there is coffee in your cup, but it's accompanied by these herbs. So in this case, I wanted to be super literal about it so people could really clearly see what was going on inside the bag. And there's, different roasts that come along with that. And so we're still in the process of kind of redesigning everything else that goes with that. But again, it's sort of like an interesting project for sort of looking familiar to the people that already subscribe, that are already loyal customers. But, she obviously wants to make some inroads beyond our area into Toronto. And so just sort of having this, when you can't be the person, behind the coffee and talking about it, how does your packaging do that talking for you? So that's usually the story behind packaging design and the rationale for it. So that's that. And I think, oh yeah, sorry, one quick last one. This one I only talk about because this is another, 2.5 years coming. The pandemic really put, a pin in a lot of projects. So in this case, this is a brand new brand. Carmela Abrams, she's been making this product for years and just throwing it into a clear plastic bag and slapping a label on it. So her product is very well developed and researched and has a following, but now she's looking to break it more into retail. So she was really looking for a brand that might have some extensions to it in the future is the plan. But starting with this teff-based gluten-free cracker. So again, kind of coming up with, I know Carmela personally, and so I kind of knew her personality and how exuberant she is in that and happy and loves to talk about food. So I thought that was really important to sort of represent in the brand. And then getting a great photographer to take product shots. That's not something I have a skill set for. So we found, a really great photographer to do that, and putting it on the packaging and and just sort of making a whole story and aesthetic around that has also, again, translated into her pitch deck and website and all of that. Okay. I did want to end my talk in one last thing. That I don't feel is talked about enough. You guys are at the beginning of your career and you're going to spend a lot of time at your desk sitting down like we all are doing right now. And one thing that I've learned the hard way was to avoid that as much as possible. Get up and move. My chiropractor, I think she said 10 years ago, sitting is the new smoking. And she's absolutely right. We're doing a lot of damage to our bodies by sitting in a chair, staring at a screen, hunched over our mouse. And it's okay when you're doing it for a few years or just starting out. But if this is your career and you're doing this for decades, make a plan. One thing I've done that's been really successful for me is I've actually got a treadmill desk at home. So I'm not working out. It's a treadmill specifically for working at it as an office. So it's very, very slow. So I'm just kind of walking like this at this pace, which I can still use a mouse. I can still type. I can't talk on the phone because for some reason I just can't. My brain doesn't work with the talking and the walking. So I have to stop the treadmill for that. But I aim to get, at least 2 hours, 3 hours a day walking while I'm working the 8-hour day. So I can say that I haven't been completely stationary the entire day. Of course, getting out and, going to the gym or going for a walk or doing your favorite sport is also super important. But if, just making a plan for that, if you're going to be doing this and this is your career, I would just say, just make a plan for how you're going to not be sitting all the time. Because it will, I personally know it will definitely, affect your body long-term, and it doesn't want this. I can tell you that right now. We're not designed for this. We're really designed for walking slowly around all day long. So make sure you find some way to sort of integrate that into your life. And then I just wanted to give you that word of advice now, because you're early in your career and you can make that plan before it's too late. But yeah, that's it. So I just left my contact information there if you wanted to give me a follow or send me an email or whatever. And hopefully I didn't talk too long. And thanks for your time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Amanda. That was such a great talk. And I think very interesting to know how you started, and like you had a whole different career and then like you switched to design, and it's just incredible to hear your story. So we do have short amount of time, but I do want to give people like a chance to ask a question. Is there anybody that really wants to ask a question? I do have one, but I want to give you guys a chance. So then I'll ask my question.
So yeah, please.
So I absolutely love packaging, and it's one of the things that I really want to do. And I wanted to ask, what's your creative process when you want to start a packaging project?
Well, I try to, because this is something that I was doing even before I got into food, was really understanding everything I could about the business, right? So I actually do have a questionnaire that I have clients fill out. And it has everything to do with, who their audience is, what their demographics are, how are they looking to grow, what do they see themselves in terms of, how do they see their sales growth in 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, who they consider their competition, and really pay attention to all of that. I really like to make sure I'm kind of armed with all the information about the company as much as possible. And then I do, go to the grocery store or look online on a grocery online channel and just see who the competition is. If I was looking for a Teff cracker, what other Teff crackers are out there? Or if it's addressing a specific health benefit, what other products out there are doing the same thing. And then I will do some research into packaging. Of course, the die line is a really great place to sort of look for packaging inspiration in that, but I almost try to avoid that, because I know when you start looking in the same industry at the same things, you tend to design the same way, right? So I try to avoid that and rather look to other industries that might be complementary. So I feel design really pervades a lot of different areas like architecture and car design and textiles. So I try to immerse myself in those when I have time, and use that to inform my design decisions. And so just trying to hope to carry those kind of elements into it to produce something really, truly original. So yeah, it's that combination of kind of doing my own research, looking at, what is possible in representing that particular product, but also really staying in touch, with what the client needs. I know with design, we all definitely have a bit of an ego and want to see our stamp on things. But the nicest compliment I got from someone once, a business associate, he said, I've noticed that you don't necessarily have a particular style. You seem to do what the client really requires. And that is something that I was sort of, a point of pride for me, was to make sure that I was delivering, not necessarily, if the client says they like purple, I'm not going to give them purple. It's more explaining why they need the color red, why, given the product that they are in the space that they're occupying, what consumers are expecting and what the competition's doing, this is why we need red, right? So it's a lot of that, and just kind of coming at that space with that sort of rationale. Yeah, did that answer the question? Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you so much. So anybody have any questions? Oh, Jasmine.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I really resonated with how you kind of stumbled upon design, and then you were kind of the big fish in a small pond doing posters for around your city. I used to do the same thing like in my high school. So it made me think of like, what's some advice or something that you would say to your younger self who had just started design, besides walking more?
Yeah, good point. Well, I think it was really the marketing thing that it took me a while to learn about. I think, like I said, when I started, I was so proud of knowing HTML and putting up a website. And I thought, well, that's all I need to do. And then I kind of sat back and waited for the calls that never came, right? So just kind of learning whatever works for you. I don't think there are rules with marketing as much as, a lot of experts will say. It's really custom to your place and time and your company. And that's true for my clients, and that's true for me. So, figuring out what I'm comfortable doing, what I can do consistently, and then just choosing that and sticking with it. But it means getting out there in some sense, right? So again, if you can get out to networking events, meet people face to face, that has been huge for me, and that takes time. It doesn't mean the phone's going to ring the next day. It's going to ring maybe 6 months down the road, but you're putting those sort of seeds in place. And then again, if that doesn't really rock your boat, if you really hate the idea of talking to crowds or talking to new people, finding ways to demonstrate your expertise differently, whether it be on social media with content or writing articles, for RGD or elsewhere, and just kind of, giving that expertise that you're able to now leverage when you're having conversations with clients, when you've been able to demonstrate sort of your knowledge that way. So I wish I had done more of that. I think, I would have been able to jumpstart a lot of the slower periods if I had been more consistent with that in the early days.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
That's awesome. So I don't see any other hands up. So I'm just gonna say, yeah, no, that was great. Thank you so much, Amanda. It was such a pleasure to have you tonight, and hope to be still like everyone. Amanda shared her Instagram and LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't share my LinkedIn, but I'm pretty easy to find. I think, yeah. If you were to Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah,
sure.
We'll make sure to connect with you, and thank you so much for tonight. You're more than welcome to join, stay in the call, but we're just gonna go over student stuff. So
okay. Well, I'm gonna go put my kid to bed, but yeah, no, it was really great speaking to you guys for sure. And definitely feel free, if you just have questions, random questions, and you want to reach out by email, please feel free to do that. I know things only occur to you a couple of days later, so I'm here for that. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Amanda.
Have a great night, everyone. Take care.
Good night.
Bye.